Hello again, everybody. Great to have you along as we welcome you to yet another edition of Journey Through Sports and Life. My name is Scott Murray, and alongside
Marjorie Herrera-Lewis
and Marnie Schneider.
And each and every week, the three of us share with you some of the great stories of the past in the world of sports and the world of life as we talk to some of the iconic individuals who have really set the tone. And when you talk about sports, not only what they did on the field, but off the field as well, making a difference in the lives of those that need it most. And you talk about some of these people that are so philanthropic, and one of the people that we have on board here today is certainly that. So I know you're excited, and you're excited, huh?
We are.
Yeah, we are. Number 74, Dallas Cowboys came to town in Dallas, Texas back in 1960. Tom Landry was the head coach, and who was the first draft pick in 61 out of TCU, All-American? Robert Lilly. Bob Lilly, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing fine, Scott.
Boy, well, I tell you what,
Glad
this
to be
trio
here.
is excited to see you. You look
Thank
great.
you. Well, I'm doing pretty well for 82 and a half.
Unbelievable. Well, you
No.
still look
It
like you
seems
could.
like
Then you look
only-
like you could suit it up right
Yes,
now.
I was going to say, you told me that you don't, you're not lifting weights anymore, but you could be. You could get out there and still play.
Well, I haven't lifted weights in 48 years. But that was because of my shoulders.
Well, that's unreal.
Anyway, yeah, it's been a wonderful run.
Well, you know the history right here. I want them to share their history and their history with the NFL. Go ahead and tell the world and tell our viewers, and our listeners. But what did you do when it came to the Cowboys and what have you?
Well, I was a Cowboys beat writer
That's
for the
right.
Fort Worth Star-Telegram back in the day,
Yeah.
and covered the team for several years. Later went to the Dallas Morning News and continued to cover the team. And since then, I've written a novel about a woman who coached football in Brownwood, Texas during World War II, based on a true story, Tylene Wilson, and that's where we are today.
Yep. And Marnie?
Well, I am the granddaughter of Leonard Toews, who owned the Philadelphia Eagles, and the daughter of Susan Toews Spencer, the first and only female general manager, vice president, and legal counsel of a professional football team. So I got a really special view of watching the Eagles often lose to the Dallas Cowboys, but only in the last 2 minutes. Like I said, the Eagles were winning the game until the last 2 minutes, but so that was always lots of fun. And I'm currently writing a children's book series called Football Freddy and Fumble the Dog Game Day in the USA. And each book highlights our great cities that host football teams and the amazing fans that enjoy cheering and celebrating their home teams.
Yeah, well, Philadelphia did a good job of that.
Were they the worst fans that you had to play against?
They were probably the best fans, but not the best Cowboy fans.
Okay.
Oh, that is such a great way of
That's a
putting it.
good way to put it. Yeah, see,
exactly.
always the diplomat. Bob Lilly. Incredible. Well, Bob is our special guest here as we continue yet another edition of Journey Through Sports and Life. And Bob, we are delighted to have you here. All three of us really looking forward to spending a little time with you here. And we see that you're dressed with a T-shirt and your Hall of Fame from there it is, right?
I have to wear it
Canton, Ohio,
sometimes,
Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Keep the moths out of it.
But you have no idea what he brought. And when we come back from the break, we'll show you. Welcome back to this edition of Journey Through Sports and Life. Scott, along with Marnie and Margie, and we're delighted to welcome you all as we, again, continue on with our very special guest. Number 74 on the football field, but he's one of the best when it comes to playing football. We're talking about Pro Football Hall of Famer Bob Lilly, Dallas Cowboys, from 1961 to 74? Is that when you called it quits? That's what I thought.
14 years, yeah.
Yep, that number 74, and see you later, everybody.
Right.
And you got the Pro Football Hall of Fame jacket on right now. There's that gold jacket that we see some of the greats share with us all.
Yeah, this is something I'm very proud of.
As you should be.
I had some of my heroes from all over the country that played football, and when I eventually got TV, got to watch them, and then I got to watch some of the ceremonies of the Hall of Fame. And I always thought, boy, that would be a great honor. I couldn't believe it. When they called and told me about it, I was it scared me, really. What am I going to say? Tell them my story from coming from Throckmorton, Texas, a town of 1,300 people, over to TCU, a college of 3,900 students at that time, and in the Southwest Conference. So, it was and then, I think there was a big blessing in there because the timing of everything. 1960 was my senior year, and '60 was the year I made All-American. And back in those days, they only had generally about 13 players who made All-American. That included the quarterback could go out, but the rest of us had to stay in on both offense and defense. And then you had the kickers. So the teams that I went to New York was a consensus All-American, and one of the teams I went to New York with was Kodak. And Kodak had they had a big banquet for us at the Rathskeller, which was in the Bowery. Mm-hmm. And we were down inside this restaurant, a wonderful restaurant once you got in. But they gave us a big box, and inside that box was a 35 millimeter camera called a Motormatic. You wound it up instead of having an electric motor, and it had a little sensor on it that measured the light. They gave us 100 rolls of color, 100 rolls of black and white, prepaid mailers. So when I went back to TCU, I played in about 3 or 4 All-Star games. So I took this camera with me and took pictures of all of my buddies that were on these teams. And my next year, I was in an apartment with another cowboy, and we had 2 bathrooms. And so one of the bathrooms I made a black and white darkroom out of. Mm-hmm. And it was the old process. So that's when I first started printing pictures, and ultimately did a book starting with negatives I shot that first year.
You've always been a photographer
right.
of sorts,
yeah.
That always
and I got
interested
into,
in it.
I got into wildlife, and I got into scenics and so forth, but it's been a real passion of mine as well.
Well, Marnie, let's pick it up, and you go ahead and ask Bob our first big-time question. Go for it.
Well, it's about family. So I, know that your beautiful wife is here, and we talked for a few minutes about your family. How do you think you were able to, keep it all together, being kind of the first of the first-round draft pick, and a young team in a young city? I mean, how did you guys do all that?
Yeah. And a young guy.
Well, yeah,
right out of college.
Well, probably because I didn't know any better. But I had been working hard all my life, and my dad was crippled in one leg, and so he took me to TCU football games when I was a little boy, and the people let us in free because Dad was limping, and he said, "Mr. Lilly, you can take your son Bob and sit anywhere you want to, but if someone comes up with tickets, just move somewhere else because it's not going to be full." And so I got to go through all my whole high school, grade school, going to TCU football games.
So was it always a desire of yours then to follow up and go to TCU? Because
that was my desire, because we actually moved my senior year because of drought. We had a 7-year drought, and we were custom farmers. Dad built ponds, and he dozed trees to get them off the land so that the water, they wouldn't soak up all the water. And anyway, we moved up to Pendleton, Oregon. And I had Pendleton, Oregon turned out to be a wonderful place to live. It was very similar to where I grew up because it was farming and ranching. And they had the Pendleton Roundup, and it was a little bigger town. We played in 4A, which was a top category up there. And I made All-State in football, and I think I made second team or first team All-State in basketball. And I had scholarships. I visited all the teams, and finally I got we didn't have a telephone. We lived in a very small little duplex. And I got a 1-cent postcard from TCU from Allie White, who was the line coach from TCU. And he wrote me a handwritten little note and said, "Dear Bob, TCU is willing to offer you a 4-year scholarship and all your room and board and $10 a month for if you would like to come to TCU." And so I said, "If you would like, call this number." So I went over to my coach's office and called TCU and told them, and I said, "I'd like to come visit." And I had a buddy that wanted to go look as well. And so we drove all the way down from Pendleton, Oregon to Throckmorton. My grandmother was still there, and spent the night with her and borrowed $20 and came to TCU because they were going to give us each $150 for travel. And so anyway, we looked. Larry tried out for the basketball team. He made the team. Larry Applegate was his name. But he would have to pay his first year, and he couldn't afford it. or he would have had a full scholarship after that. And so anyway, we drove back, but we did get our checks cashed. The coach took us over and cashed our checks for us, and went back by grandmother's house, spent the night, gave her $20 back, and made it on back to Oregon. And anyway, so then my aunt and uncle, we had some other kin folks in the Tacoma area and even around Pendleton. Some of my grandmother's folks, they came up to visit the Lilly clan. And on the way back, they picked me up and my brother. They brought Larry back to Granny's because Mother and Dad had said they were going to move back, and they took me on to Fort Worth where they lived, and dropped me off at TCU. And so that's
and the rest, as they say, is history, huh?
Did you ever even consider staying in Oregon, going to school up there?
Well, I visited Oregon State, Washington. Washington, they had Jim Owens, I believe, was a new coach there. And Jim Owens, I visited, and he kind of took me under his wing, showed me around, told me, he said, Bob, we're going to win the Rose Bowl while you're here. So he said, you can just put that down on your calendar. And so anyway, then one of the alumni from Washington that lived in Pendleton took me driving through the wheat fields that he owned a bunch of, and he started talking about, well, we've got alumni up there that can loan you a car. We can't give it to you, but we can loan you one that you can drive, and we'll give you some odd jobs that you can make some money to have spending money, because we know you don't have any, and we'll find a doctor that can help your dad's leg. They knew all about me. I mean,
they did their homework, didn't they?
And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, right. And nobody had ever done anything like that for me. So I got to TCU, and we had a freshman team. Our first game we played the freshman of A&M, and Barry Bryant was still the head coach there. And he had recruited, he had called. We didn't have a phone, so he called our coach. But I didn't call him back because I didn't want to go to school there. And I was afraid of him from what I'd heard.
Oh, that's something.
We played their freshman, and we beat them, and I blocked a kick and scored with it. And that was my first touchdown in college.
Oh, wow.
That's
and was
fantastic.
that at TCU or on the road?
That was down at A&M.
It was at A&M?
Yeah, that was
Isn't that something?
Pure
Wow.
luck.
And that's something. And of course, they talked about, hey, we're going to take you to the Rose Bowl for sure. Mark it on your calendar.
Well,
you ended up going to the Cotton Bowl.
I went to
at
Cotton Bowl.
TCU.
They went to 2 Rose Bowls.
And yeah, right. There you go. And I think, if memory serves me, that's the last time till Jim Wacker became the head coach in the 80s.
Yeah.
I think it was till 1984 when they went to the Bluebonnet Bowl.
That's right.
TCU had not been in a bowl game since Bob Lilly was at TCU. Boy, what is that? The 60s and the 70s into the first part of the 80s.
My junior year, we went to the first ever Bluebonnet Bowl.
Isn't that something?
But in my sophomore year, we played Air Force in the Cotton Bowl.
That's unreal.
And
We got to take a break. Hold that thought.
Yep.
Bob Lilly is our special guest, Hall of Famer from the Dallas Cowboys and, of course, TCU. We're back with more of Journey Through Sports and Life right after this. Once again, we welcome you back to yet another edition of Journey Through Sports and Life. I'm Scott, this is Marjorie, and that's Marnie, and we're alongside the great one. We're talking about Mr. Cowboy, Bob Lilly. Hello, my friend.
Hello, Scott.
Okay, quickly finish up the story you were sharing with about being at TCU in the late 50s, in the bowl games and what have you. And of course, you mentioned about the Air Force. That was that 0-0 game in the snow, right?
Yeah, I was there my sophomore year, and I was starting. And we played Air Force. They had a pretty good team, and we had a good team. And anyway, unfortunately, the night before the game, it snowed about 18 or 19 inches.
Wow.
And no one ever had that kind of snow before Cotton Bowl, so they had no equipment to snow blow it or whatever. They had lawnmowers out there. They had brooms. They were trying everything they could.
Lawnmowers and brooms.
And anyway, it warmed up pretty nicely, and by the time we started the game about 2:00, it was mud. And so
Unbelievable.
we could drive the ball a little ways, and then we'd sputter. And sometimes we would get down in field goal range, and I think we attempted 5 field goals, and I think they attempted 4, but I may be wrong about that. But anyway, it's close to that. And we all missed. And the kickers, most of the time, they were straight up kickers. They would kick, and then they would fall. They would slide down. The other leg would slide down, and they would get muddy. And
Oh, boy.
anyway, we looked like a mud bowl when it was over.
Yeah, that's something. Well, Margie, who's got a question?
Well, I'm curious. How did you even get started in football? How did you get, growing up in Texas, of course, it was probably everywhere, but how old were you? What was your beginning in football?
Third grade. Third grade, we played what we call breakup. And so that was the third, fourth, and fifth grade, boys. And we had a little ball. It wasn't a football. And so anyway, one team or the other would flip and one team or the other would start with the ball. And so then you would tackle the guy, and whoever tackled the guy, then it wasn't like we had backs. They would hand off the ball. Anyway, every time one got tackled, he had to start being on defense. And so we were actually tackling and hitting and knocking people around when I was in the third grade.
Third grade.
Then we started another thing. I don't know what we called it now, but you put the smaller guys on your back, and then you wrestle the next guys. The bigger guys put the smaller guys on their backs, and we fought. And so anyway, I was generally the last one standing. And so
Surprise.
Yeah, really.
I think maybe that I was Dad's bulldozer. I started driving a tractor at 8, and I started hauling hay at 11. And so I would bale. I would cut the hay, mow the hay. My dad would bale it, and I would haul it. And I would take the tractor, and I would tie. I had a couple of pieces of leather that had a hook on them, and I would get it started in a straight line, a flatbed trailer behind the tractor, and I would throw the hay on there as fast as I could. And then whenever it got full, it wasn't on there neatly, but it was on there. I would turn it off, neaten it up, turn the tractor back on, get on it, turn it on, let it get started, throw more hay on there, stop it. Then I would drive over to the barn, and I had to throw it up into the top of up into the hay loft. And so I'm guessing I threw 100,000 bales.
But what
Wow.
a great work ethic.
Yeah.
Don't you agree?
Absolutely.
You see
Yes.
young people today, there's such a almost entitlement that, what are you going to do for me? And here you were. What a great way to grow up in the commitment that you had on behalf of your parents and what have you to make that commitment. That, I mean, you're going to school as well. You got to study and do other things. And yet you knew what your role was, what your job was, and the opportunity that you had to just make yourself a better man.
Were you already one of the bigger kids, or did you have a growth spurt later?
I was tall and lean, and then I got tall and thicker. And
Yeah, well, with
was
all
from
that hay and everything, no wonder.
And then we finally got a windrower instead of a rake. The windrower did two jobs. It cut the hay. It was 17 foot long instead of 6 foot. It cut 17 feet, and then it had a conveyor belt that took that hay and put it over in a row, just like you raked it.
Yeah.
So it saved a whole lot. Plus, I could cut 50 acres a day, and I could only cut 20 acres a day with the mower.
Yeah.
So were you still doing this in high school? When
Yeah, I
you
did
were
it in high
playing?
school till it just finally quit.
So you had school, you had this commitment, and you were playing
Right.
organized football at that point.
Yeah, but during football season, my dad let me off, and basketball. But I was out there on Saturday, and then as soon as I got done with practice, which was usually about 5 o'clock, I would go out there and work 2 hours and then come back and eat. But anyway, I think I always thought that most of my strength came out of my body, because I could throw that hay up, and I was twisting and doing that, and then I broke the windrower. I broke the jack off of it. You had to jack it up so that you could hook it up to the tractor. You have a hitch that you put a bolt in. So then I thought, well, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I think I can lift that thing. So I got me some rocks over there, and I could pick it up, and I'd put rocks under it, and then I could back it up. I sometimes had to put rocks in the tractor wheels to get it to fit.
Wow.
And so I did that, and then one day a buddy of mine, we were fishing. He had a Renault, had the engine in the back. We'd get up at 5:30 in the morning and go fishing, and we'd clean the fish and take them by all the people we knew that liked to eat fish. But one day we had a flat, and so we had a wrench, but the jack was not in the car. And So I told him, I said, well, that doesn't look any heavier than that windrower I've been picking up. I said, let's get some rocks.
Oh, gosh.
So I picked the windrower up, and he put the rocks under it. So the next morning I go to school, and I'm looking at all these juniors and seniors, and I'm like a freshman or sophomore, and they're trying to pick the car up, and they can't. One of them got it off the ground. That was about it. I could pick it up to my chest. And so anyway, I thought, what am I scared of these guys for?
That's
I think
crazy.
that gave
You
me
can
more
lift cars.
That gave me more confidence.
Yeah, I bet it did. And the rest is history as you go on to TCU and then on to the Cowboys. And I think our listeners would probably love to hear about the Dallas Cowboys and your career with the Cowboys. So let's move forward and talk about the relationship. Anytime I talk to Tom Landry, you talk about the players that really made a difference.
Right.
Lilly and Staubach were always a couple of the names that he always mentioned. I mean, just solid people. And of course, FCA, I remember how honored you were, or I was, when you called me and said, would I put my name on the tournament that you had because of Tom Landry with the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And he had introduced you to all of that. Yeah. And then we had the Bob Lilly, Scott Murray Charity Classic, for FCA for a number of years. And I was so honored to just have my name alongside yours. Talk about Tom Landry and that first coach. And for a decade, you didn't go anyplace. It wasn't until the 70s that you got into to a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So just bring us back to those early days and what have you with the Cowboys and Tom Landry. What a man he was.
Well, when I got there, of course, I met Coach Landry after they drafted me. I met him and visited with him, and we became friends. Or you never really were a close friend while you were playing under him, but as soon as I finished my career, we were very close friends. But anyway, he was. The first, I'll just talk about the first meeting, first day of two days, our first training camp we went to, which was up in Northville, Minnesota. We went there, and the next year we went somewhere in Michigan. And the next 12 years we went to Thousand Oaks, California, which was wonderful. Mm-hmm. But anyway, he got up. He read. He had a book that thick, and it had all the fine schedules, all the, what we attire, what we wear when we're on trips. And you had a little fine right by it. And if you were late for the meeting, if you weren't in your seat when the roll was called, that was $50. Mm-hmm. And every time you were late, it doubled. So it was 50, and then the next time it was 100, the next time it was 200, the next time it was 400. If you were late for the plane, that was $1,000.
Wow.
So if you were late,
too many people
unless you had a wreck or something like that, but if you were late, so we had a good discipline. You didn't do all that. But on the other hand, he was very nice. He always, we watched film every week after a game, and he would critique it, which we all hated, because if even me or Leroy or any of us, didn't matter who you were, if you made a little mistake, I'll give you, for instance, I learned a lot about football because I learned when I lined up in front of the guard, I got to the point where I could tell what he was going to do. But mainly, if he was right on the line of scrimmage and his fingernails turned pink like that, that means he's going to try to kill me. So I was very quick. I played racquetball after every practice for about an hour.
Oh, wow.
I would just listen to the count and watch him, and I could see every whisker in his face. And at the instant he even moved, I was around him. Well, we were not supposed to go around the block, but I was back in the backfield waiting on the running back. And so Coach Landry finally called me in after a couple of years, and he said, Bob, he said, I don't like going around blocks. He said, why do you do that? I said, well, Coach, and I showed him. I said, see my fingers? If that guy's up on the ball and they're evenly split between the center and the tackle, that means they're going to zone block me, and he's going to try to kill me. And I said, what I do about twice a game is go around him. Then he doesn't know what I'm going to do. And so I said, I never have any problem with him anymore. And I didn't. I went through my whole career like that. And
what coach say to that?
Yeah, what did he say?
So he told me, well, what he said, well, what are you going to do when you slow down? And I said, I'm going to quit. I'm going to quit doing it, Coach.
Right.
That's incredible.
Oh, that's great. Well, we've got to take one more break here, Bob, and we'd like to hear, talk about the first Super Bowl you were in, and you've got that ring someplace, I'm sure. And
She's got the diamonds in her ring.
oh, does she?
Oh,
well,
wow.
we'll talk about that when we come back.
I've got
He's
the
pointing
ring
to his
at
wife
home.
Ann, who also happens to be here in the studio with
Put
us.
the diamonds back in anytime.
When we come back with yet another edition of Journey Through Sports and Life. Welcome back as we continue with this edition of Journey Through Sports and Life. I'm Scott.
Marjorie?
Marnie?
And Bob Lilly. You got it. Number 74, Mr. Cowboy. And you now have changed again. Your apparel has changed. There it is. And that is the 100 jacket. The NFL, and on the 100th anniversary of the NFL in 2020, 100 players were picked from all the 32 NFL teams as the greatest in a century. I mean, talk about the best of the best. That's above and beyond the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Emmitt Smith, Roger Staubach, Randy White, Deion Sanders is also a member of that,
Right.
and Bob Lilly. Very impressive.
Yeah, I was very impressed myself, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
That was quite an honor. I mean,
Oh.
I think back to my third and fourth grade when I'm looking up at these guys and I'm thinking, I don't think I can ever get there.
Well, you've surpassed
But
99.9% of them. You're a
That's
part of
right.
the best of the best. So good for you. Marjorie, I know you had a couple of questions as we head
Yeah.
down the home stretch here.
Yeah, I'm curious. So when you're at TCU, you get drafted by the Cowboys, the first ever draft pick they've ever had. You have no idea, of course, what the franchise is going to become. You look back on that now. What is the significance to you of being the first draft pick on such an iconic team?
Well,
Franchise.
truthfully, I never thought about it, and nobody. I think one of my teammates told me I was drafted by the Cowboys, and I think I'd been drafted by the Texans earlier, but I didn't really know what to do because I went to talk with my coach, Coach Abe Martin, and he advised me. He said, this is both owners. I know them, the families, and they're fine. They're wonderful people. But he said there have been two other leagues start up in this area, and neither of them made it. If you want to stay in this area and be around your family and around your friends at TCU and so forth, he said you might want to, if the money's about the same, you might want to stay with the NFL, which was the Cowboys.
Yeah.
And that's why I did. That's why I stayed with the Cowboys. So,
Versus Lamar Hunt and the Dallas
Yeah,
Texans, who
Right.
became the Kansas City Chiefs a
And
couple
I
years
can
later.
see, where you wouldn't even know where it's going to go, anything like that. But as you look back on that now and know that you were the first one picked from this franchise, has it increased any kind of meaning now that you can look back on it?
well, it's certainly an honor as far as I'm concerned. I mean, they could pick. There were so many different people they could have picked in the state of Texas and out of the state of Texas that they would pick me. But I was certainly it really touched my heart because that's where I wanted to stay here, and I wanted to. And I'd heard a lot of good things about Coach Landry, and so I knew that they hadn't had a very good team the first year, but Texans might have. But anyway, when I came to the training camp the first year, and I'll make this brief, most of the players there were picked from a pool of different teams put up 5 or 6 players. The Cowboys got to pick 1 or 2 from each team, and some of the people that had already been cut, they picked back up. And I know our starting quarterback was Eddie LeBaron, and Don Meredith had been traded for future draft picks, and he was an understudy. And then my second year, Don and Eddie were alternating downs, and then Don became the quarterback and was doing a great job for us. But anyway, it was a great honor. Coach Landry was such an honorable man, a wonderful coach, brilliant coach. And he came up with the flex defense, which that's how we beat Miami, Scott.
Mm-hmm.
in the
They
Super Bowl?
they were a running team. The flex defense was geared in the old days to stop running teams.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we stopped their running team, they weren't used to passing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that that's why that happened. But I think we wanted to mention the team Baltimore game. And that game, the Super Bowl V, kind of took the wind out of us a little bit because first play that they scored on was, back then the rules were if you threw the ball and it touched an offensive guy first, then the second offensive guy could not catch the ball and run with it unless a defensive player had touched it. And they said Mel Renfro had touched the ball. But we had no instant replay. But we came back home and watched it back and forth, and Mel was several feet away from the ball.
Oh.
Then at the end of the game, toward the end of the game, we fumbled the ball on the 1 foot line going in, and that was Craig Martin and Dave Manders. And Dave Manders came up with the ball, and the Baltimore guys were going like this, and the referees started going like that, and they gave them the ball. And we still were ahead of them going into the last minute of the game, or a minute and a half. We threw 2 interceptions, and the kicker they had was a rookie who had never kicked a 40-yard field goal. He kicked 2. One of them was 47, I think, and one of them was 43, and they beat us 3 points.
Wow.
Yeah. Of course, you talk about Craig Morton being the quarterback that year. The next year was 71, the season of 71. That's the year the Texas Stadium was built. And it also happened to be that Coach Landry was shuttling the quarterbacks.
Shuttle them.
Had
the captains went in.
That's right.
We all got together and talked about it and said, we need one quarterback, whoever you pick.
Well, you played, as memory serves, you played New England here at Texas Stadium, and that was on the 24th of October. And then on the 31st, which was Halloween, you went to Chicago. And Coach Landry said, my guy is Roger Staubach. And that was the first of 10 games he won in a row.
That's right.
And the 10th game was Super Bowl VI, and the Cowboys win their first ever Super Bowl.
24-3.
Yep. And then, of course, the next year, that was the perfect season. And to this day, the only one in the history of the NFL, the Miami Dolphins in the 72 season.
And now they're the only team that's won 17 in a row.
Exactly right.
Season.
Yep.
That was the next year. And every time I used to see Bob Greasy, and I see him a lot now, but he doesn't say it anymore. He used to ask me, he said, how did you catch me? How did you catch me? I said, because I was faster than you are, Bob. And I said, why don't you forget about that and think about the 17-0? I said, nobody's probably ever going to surpass that record.
Right.
And I said, I would be much more proud of that than I would be sorry about getting sacked by some old lineman.
and you started to tell us before the break as far as the diamonds and what have you from that Super Bowl and Super Bowl VI. Ann has those in her ring. Is that right? Yep. Your wife?
She does.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
That's kind of cool. Yep. That's kind of cool. Marnie, we're heading down the home stretch. Have you got a final question you want to ask, Bob?
You've been around, you are a great and are a legend, and you've been around so many legends. So maybe just one little anecdote or something, a saying that maybe carried you through your career on the field and then off the field, something like that our listeners might say, Bob Lilly said this.
Well, I had a lot of sayings. But I don't know.
Is there anything that we can use on the air? This is a family show,
Well, I will say this. After Super Bowl V, we got together, all the team, and committed ourselves right then, as soon as we got home, to start working out. And we were going to go back to the Super Bowl the next year, and they ain't going to beat us. And so we did. We worked out every day, hard. And I mean extra, because they worked us hard enough anyway. But that was our goal, and we kept it. And we'd grab each other's hand and pull and say, "We're going to get them. We're going to get them." But we had a lot of sayings. I don't remember. We had so many that I can't pick a best one. But
how about your legacy? To play off what Marnie just asked, things that you think back all the way. Here you are wearing that jacket. There's only 99 other players in the history of the league have ever worn that maroon jacket. And that's part of the 100 team from, the 100th anniversary of the NFL. Yeah. I mean, that's iconic. Well, how about you? What stands out? Is there one thing when, years from now, people go to the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, or they see you in that jacket that you've got on right now, and they think to myself or themselves, wow, Bob Lilly. How would you like to be remembered like that, your legacy?
Well, I just would like to be remembered as a person who played the defense that we were supposed to play, played it the best I could, and that I was a clean player. I did not ever try to hurt anybody. And I'll never forget the first Pro Bowl I went to, where I was a young guy. I was my second year, and I went out to L.A. to the Coliseum, and they had one of the old pressed ice boxes that had a brand name on it, and these guys were all going over there, and I'm looking at them, and they're drinking beer. And so I'm thinking, I never heard of this. And I went over there and looked, and there was nothing in there but beer.
Oh.
So anyway, that's not something to be remembered by me, but it's something that I thought that really shook me up, because that was my first time to actually go to some big deal, and but it going to the Hall of Fame was a real highlight too. I mean, that was Coach Landry flew all the way from California to introduce me, and I was scared to death, and my whole family was out in front of me, and my friends, and everybody else's, and it was really touching. I mean, there were four of us: Deacon Jones and Herb Adderley and myself and
Jim Otto.
Jim Otto.
Was it Jim Otto?
Jim
Yeah,
Otto.
yeah.
And Jim is he never missed a super Hall of Fame get together that we have every summer until the last two, and I think he's lost some limbs. And what a wonderful guy! But I met some terrific people out there.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Hall of Fame, and most of the guys, I mean, that got these jerseys were a lot of them were heroes of mine. Some of them were before me even, and a lot of them were during my time, and of course a lot of them were after my time. But that was really like, should I be here? I came from Throckmorton, which was a wonderful place to grow up, but it was, it just seems when you barely have enough players to have 11 players on the field, and here you go to TCU, and you've got lots of players, and you go to the Cowboys, and you're playing big league football, and I mean, you have to think back and really thank your mom and dad, your grandparents. My grandmother and granddad, she raised a garden, she had eggs, and he had some cattle, he ran cattle, and every time one would break a leg or something, he would hoist it up, take it to the frozen food locker. They would shoot it in the head, bleed it, cut the leg off, and make hamburger and steaks and roast. And so anyway, I think about all those things that went into the fact that, I grew strong and strong-boned, and I never missed but one game, and that was a playoff game. But I played for 23 years of football, and that's the only game I ever missed, and it was because my hamstring was torn in two.
Wow.
And that was because Cliff Harris hit me in the back, thinking he was going to I was going to score a touchdown against Denver in a playoff game, but he hit me in the hip to knock this guy off. He was trying to knock the guy that was dragging me down, and he missed and hit my hip, and I did a spread eagle and popped. And anyway, it was one. I had a wonderful career.
Yeah.
I thank God that I had teammates like I did, and you don't do it by yourself.
Right.
You have coaches like Ernie Stoutner and Coach Landry and all these guys who Ernie taught us an awful lot about how to get stronger in some areas that we needed to get stronger to dominate the defensive, the line, between the lines. He showed us some good moves to get to to slap the guys upside the head.
Well, you also had the good fortune of the consistency with the same coaches, because Ernie was there for a long time.
Yeah, he did.
Also.
Yep, Coach Landry for 29 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had consistency with players and coaches.
Yeah.
And
The same, Drew Pearson said the same thing about consistency with, coaching and players playing with the same people really does make a difference.
it does.
And before you answer that question, we have to take one final break. And we're going to continue with Bob Lilly and head down the home stretch right after this here on Journey Through Sports and Life. Welcome back. Journey through sports and life. Marnie and Margie, I'm Scott, and Bob Lilly, our special guest. You had the last question in. Go for it, my friend.
All right. So you mentioned right before our break about consistency with players and coaches. And how does that really make a difference?
Well, it makes a lot of difference because when you in the off season, you know what you need to do to prepare for the when you go to training camp. What kind of shape you need to be in, because it's very, very difficult in training camp. And you know like Ernie Stoutner was our line coach. We knew exactly what he was going to put us through. We knew what the rules were with Coach Landry, and we knew the defense, and we knew the players generally that we were going to play against during the year, because that was pretty consistent as well. Although they did change from time to time, but pretty much everything was pretty much the same, except everybody was putting in new plays. We put in I formation. We did several things on offense. We changed our defense up a little bit. We stunted a little bit more than we had earlier. I mean, these were things we might do from year to year, but it was consistent. Everything was very consistent. We went to the same training camp for my last 12 years. And we knew where the cafeteria was. We knew where our dorm was. We knew where the field was. We knew exactly where, we had our own locker. It was like you didn't have to fumble around and find a new way. It was like very consistent, which I think really helped, because we didn't have to worry about a lot of things. All we had to worry about was doing our job out on the field and knowing what we're doing. And so by having the same players consistently as your teammates, we knew what each other was going to do. We knew how we were going to react on the field. We knew how to stop plays. We knew how to stop their best plays. We knew what their best plays were, and we knew how to stop them, and we did. And the only thing sometimes you don't stop is a good pass. I mean, it's hard to do. Sometimes a runner will break a tackle and make some yards, but other than Jim Brown jumping me and going for 100 yards, I'll never forget. That was my rookie year. He jumped right over me, and I'm looking down the field.
In 10 seconds, best advice you give to any youngster who, just like you in Throckmorton umpteen decades ago, would say, wow, Bob Lilly, what would you tell them? 10 seconds.
Participate in every sport that you can. Basketball, track, football, weightlifting, all these things, because that's what I did, and it helps you. Every sport that you do, it works different muscles. Your brain gets more coordinated and syncs, and you'll become a much better athlete. And with the integrity that this man has, as one of the best and one of the kindest, nicest people you'll ever meet, off the field as well, Bob Lilly, you're a champion, you're a dear friend, and I tell you what, Marnie and Margie and I can't thank you enough.
Well, these are great stories. I love this.
Yeah. Well, I thank you all.
Yeah, you deserve that jacket, my friend.
Very nice.
Absolutely. You wear it well.
Yeah, and thanks for being the gentleman that you are.
Thank you.
More importantly, even than the great football player.
I cherish our history.
You're a good man. Bob Lilly, our special guest. So until next time on this edition of Journey for Sports and Life, I'm Scott Murray.
Marjorie Herrera-Lewis.
Marnie Schneider.
We'll see you next time. Stay well.